Welcome into the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, thrilled to be joined by Karels. Back to kind of back at week one for Texas A&M, a comfortable victory in many regards over UTSA. Got one final tune-up against Utah State before the schedule really picks up with a trip to South Bend around the corner. We're going to dive into all of that, some big-time performances in week one for Texas A&M, what we learned, and plenty more. Carter, how's it going, man? And how are you doing?
Good, man. Cowboys play tonight. Aggies are playing
Yeah,
again. It's good time. Good time of year. Love me some football, man. This really is the best time of year. This and
it,
March Madness.
it is a 5-day kickoff to kind of start last weekend was awesome. Plenty of football all across the airwaves. Some great games. Obviously, that LSU Miami game or that LSU um, that LSU Clemson game and the Miami Notre Dame games were awesome games to kind of kick off the year. And Texas A&M got their season off to a strong start with a victory over UTSA. Obviously, Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver were kind of the two talks of that weekend. Just what were some of your big takeaways from this past weekend with the win over UTSA?
Yeah, I'll start with the positives, and it's those two. You have to lead with those because you just look at the difference between this season and last season. It's just night and day at receiver. It's something we talked about all throughout preseason camp, right? All throughout the offseason that, hey, they had these bigger dudes last year at receiver, but when they're bigger, they're a little bit slower, right? You had 6'6" Noah Thomas, you had 6'4" Jade Walker, good receivers, but just could not really consistently create separation. Spacing, the timing, the rhythm just wasn't quite there with those guys. Now it's a shorter group. And so the question was kind of, well, is there going to be a red zone target? But the best thing was, hey, they might be shorter, but they're going to create a lot more separation. They're going to be a lot better yards after the catch. The timing, the spacing, the rhythm. That's what really stood out to me. There's a difference between watching it on TV and watching it up high in the press box as far as seeing just plays unfold from a bird's eye view and seeing how much space is around certain receivers and what the timing of the routes and the throws look like. And it just looked to me so much better than last year. And a lot of it is because of Casey and Craver and, Ashton Bethel Roman as well. The blocking from the receivers really stood out. You saw a lot of yards after the catch from those two. And part of it was because you had Terry Bussey and Ashton Bethel Roman blocking their tails off on the perimeter. And so that receiver group really stood out. I thought Marcus Ratcliffe defensively had a good game. The secondary looked improved. Certainly need to see it against better competition and a larger sample size, but they weren't getting gassed. They weren't getting burned. They weren't, missing a lot of plays. But you could also argue, well, that's because UTSA didn't have to throw it around very much because they had such success on the ground. And so when you shift toward the negative, I think it's, man, that run defense looked really bad. The run fits, the tackling, just all around did not look good. To their credit, the defense really shored up after that opening touchdown run at the beginning of the second half. But when you give up more than 200 yards to UTSA, it does make you wonder, okay, you're going to play Jeremiah Love in 2 weeks. So you got to get that cleaned up. And it's not even an anomaly because we saw it last year, the second half of last season. They really struggled against the run. The one last thing I'll mention is just, maybe some concerns about the O-line, maybe some concerns about the running game, the lack of the running game after so much was talked about both groups this offseason. I think it remains to be seen, and we can't quite make a huge judgment on those groups yet because I think, for starters, A&M wanted to rotate some guys up front. It sounds like they're going to do that throughout the season, but I think they were rotating more than maybe they normally would in that game. And I also think they didn't really feel like they needed to run the ball that much because, UTSA is stacking the box and really letting them get it to their guys on the perimeter. So, I'd rather take a 20-yard gain from Mario Craver on a screen than a 4-yard gain on the ground. And I think that's really what their strategy was. No running back had more than 5 carries. No running back had more than 22 snaps. Le'Veon Moss had only 3 carries. They really limited his work. And so would you have liked to see more from the ground game? Absolutely. But is it time to set off the alarms and say, wow, this is not what we thought they would be? I'm not quite there just yet.
Gutter, you mentioned a couple of those positives. I wanted to ask you about one of those negatives, which is obviously how Texas A&M struggled in the run, kind of defending the run. One of the biggest things that stood out for me is we kind of heard Mike Elko in the preseason, right? I think he was kind of done talking about it by the end of the preseason. He mentioned a couple times it was a long time ago, and people kept bringing it up. But that was what was fresh in people's minds, right? Was how A&M struggled down the stretch against South Carolina, obviously against Auburn, and then USC. How much of a concern is the run defense for you, and especially what we kind of saw in the first half? Because you mentioned A&M's going to be challenged in a couple weeks when Jeremiah Love goes against them for the second time. He kind of bounced out some runs last year, right? And A&M had trouble kind of slowing them down in the ground game last year. How much of a concern do you feel like that kind of is as you're kind of trying to nitpick performances and as you kind of look ahead to Utah State? Is that one of the biggest things you're gonna be kind of looking at?
Well, I would say, to show you how concerned I am, UTSA, that performance didn't exactly surprise me. I mean, this is kind of what this defense has been dating back to the second half of the last season. And throughout camp, it's something we heard all the time. Oh, man, they really got run all over today in the scrimmage. Man, there was a lot of explosive plays. There was a lot of explosive runs and that sort of thing. I just think it's kind of what this defense is. Now, are they going to give up 200 yards rushing to the likes of UTSA all the time? No, I bet you they bounce back and focus on it and have a nice performance against Utah State. But Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, that running back room, you could argue, is the best in the country. And so there's definitely concern there. And not just them. I mean, you think of Wisner at Texas. You think of Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. Even Auburn will have a pretty stout running game. There's going to be some tough challenges on the schedule. And I think if you looked at this defense, you had optimism that they would improve as a secondary, bringing back their whole back seven, bringing back Tyreek Chappelle and Will Lee, the experience they have on the back end. And, even some of the injuries that they had. I mentioned Chappelle. Bryce Anderson was playing through an injury last year. Marcus Ratcliffe was playing through an injury last year. Dalton Brooks was getting targeted every single game, targeting penalties. So, it was not a complete back seven. They're all back, and I think that will help the secondary. Maybe they're going to be average, but they're not going to be bad like they were, I think, last year. The run defense, you lose your top 3 defensive linemen, and there were concerns. I mean, we talked about it all offseason that, I like that they got Tyler Onyedem, but they just do not have the depth at defensive tackle. Yeah. Albert Regis is a great player. I think he could maybe be an all-SEC player this year. We'll see. But once he's out of the game, they're in big trouble there. We talked about Cassius Howell, fantastic pass rusher, somebody who, when he was in the game last year, sometimes you wondered, man, he's more effective getting at the quarterback than Scorton and Shamar Stewart. But when it comes to run defense, I think you can have success against him. The other defensive end position, it's not quite been manned by somebody that has really won that job yet. It's kind of split among a couple guys, TJ Searcy, Dayon Hayes. And then, that second level, we talk about like, okay, once they get past the defensive line, what happens? And we've seen that this is a defense that struggles with tackling. Torian York had the missed tackle on that 75-yard run before Bryce Anderson missed the tackle on the back end. 13 missed tackles for the defense. I think out of 203 rushing yards, 146 came after contact. And it was the story of last season: missed tackles, yards after contact. And so, not to dog on the group, because I do think that, hey, it's going to be a focus of theirs to really improve on. And, maybe they try to sell out against the run a little bit more. But, I think the one encouraging thing when you look at Notre Dame that you could say, hey, this could be in A&M's favor, is two things. One, for whatever reason, they don't want to give Jeremiah Love the ball. That Miami game, I'm just like, how are you not giving this guy the football? And the second thing is their offensive line did not look good, particularly their two tackles, Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp. They got worked all game. And maybe you say, well, yeah, it's because they were playing Ruben Bain, who very well could be one of the better edge rushers in the country, that sort of thing. Like, anybody's going to struggle against him, but they just looked a lot more human than maybe we thought. And if A&M can get a lead early where Cassius Howell can kind of be, pin his ears back, and it'll be obvious passing situations, and maybe they can't run the ball as much, I think that's how they win that game, is they get that early lead. They're not rattled right away. They take the crowd out of the game, and then they're able to really get to the quarterback there. Not to look ahead too much, because I know Utah State's coming up, but I do think that maybe that's the formula for this team, where they can't get in those deficits. They can't get in those situations where it's just running the ball over and over again.
You're watching the Gig 'em 24/7 Sport podcast. We're here talking UTSA, Utah State, and Notre Dame. If you're listening to us on podcast, we're going to take a quick break. If you're with us on video, stay locked into the Gig 'em 24/7 podcast. We'll be right back. Carter, got to talk about another kind of big storyline coming out of this weekend, and it's the special teams unit. Mike Elko kind of talked about, hey, we think we can be a lot better at special teams this year. Obviously, Casey Concepcion is going to have a big factor in that. EJ Smith was involved in that regard. Mario Craver, Terry Bussey. It just looked like a more explosive special teams unit. What did you make of obviously the touchdown? Casey Concepcion's punt return touchdown is a big storyline, and that kind of showed that explosiveness right off the bat. What'd you make of that special teams unit and kind of what you saw from them?
If you're going to have the one positive overreaction from week one, it's, hey, this could be one of the best special teams units in the country. And really it might not be an overreaction. I think that that's probably going to be the case this year, because where's the weakness? And we'll see what happens with Circle. But just to kind of go through each unit, the kick return, punt return, that's been a real emphasis of this offseason, in particular punt return for the Aggies. They feel like, a lot of kickoffs go out of bounds, or for touchbacks these days. So really, if you're trying to find an advantage, it's more in punt block and punt return. And so they felt like they got to do better at the punt return. I mean, I think they ranked 124th last year. And, part of it was they had Casey Concepcion, who's electric with the football, electric when it comes to yards after catch. And so when you put the ball in his hands, he's going to be really good. But, you look at that unit and it's full of veterans. It's full of guys giving great effort. And EJ Smith really epitomized that. I mean, my gosh, like when I watch that punt return, I'm not watching Casey Concepcion. I'm watching EJ Smith, because the effort that guy gave on that play, I was, it brought a smile to my face when they bring him in later in the game and they give him an opportunity to run for his first touchdown as an Aggie. He deserved that. Yeah, he deserved 4 touchdowns after that because it was just such a great effort. 60 yards, sprinting down the sidelines, blocking 3 different dudes. You give that kind of effort on special teams, you deserve more playing time. You deserve all the props in the film room, and then it'll lead to the special teams groups thriving. And it wasn't just KC. He kind of cramped on his second return. They bring in Terry Bussey, and then he's returning punts and kickoffs for long distances. And so you just saw, and again, it's UTSA, so we're going to see, but your eyes told you that, hey, this is going to be a good unit. And then you also think about, hey, you've got a really good punter. You might have one of the better punters in the country, and Tyler White. And then Jared Zirkle, you talk about one of the biggest surprises in the offseason. Randy Bond came in as a 3-year starter, was coming off a career season, was a semifinalist for the best award given to kickers in the country, had a great year. And here comes Jared Zirkle out of nowhere, replacing him. And, watching him in practice, I think the question was always maybe the kind of the consistency and the accuracy, but no one ever questioned his leg, and he clearly had a much bigger leg than Randy Bond. I watched him make a 55-yard field goal in practice just in a limited window. In high school as a junior, he made a 59-yard field goal. So it's a guy who has a huge leg, and what a weapon to have when you get in those situations and you got to kick in the 50s. And so, we'll see. We haven't seen him kick any field goals yet, so it could backfire. And you have that luxury of having Randy Bond in case he does struggle. But for him to overtake him tells you that, hey, this guy could have a pretty good year, because that replacing a 3-year starter is pretty difficult.
Yeah. Hey, we're roughly, 17, 20 minutes into this podcast, and we've talked about a lot of the supporting cast, right? And it kind of starts with Marcel Reed, and this was I think this was a big performance for him to kind of come out, 4 touchdown passes, obviously, and a really strong start. And there's a lot of kind of eyeballs on him, right? Mike Elko kind of talked about what he wanted to see strides wise this year in terms of the passing game. Talked about his anticipation and the timing just being a little bit better and a little bit sharper, which you would expect it to be, given he had, all of fall camp as the starter. He obviously started down the stretch of last year, and now he's heading into what's kind of a really big year for him to really stake claim to this job and provide that consistency that A&M really hasn't had at the quarterback position in the last couple of years. When you look at his performance against UTSA, as we've said before, kind of keep the caution tape out, keep the, take it as UTSA. He's got a much bigger challenge coming up in roughly a week when they have to go to Notre Dame. But your impressions of what you saw, and maybe some areas that he took some strides watching him last year to this year, and maybe some areas you still want to see, even as you look at Utah State, Notre Dame before they get into conference play.
Well, I just really loved the confidence, the anticipation, and the timing that he showed. Did not have to be a superhero. We've said it all off season, like he's going to be put in a position to succeed, where maybe last year he probably had to do a little bit more for this offense to thrive. I just loved how he distributed it to guys confidently and accurately, short and intermediate. Just seemed such a smooth operation where it's, oh, here's Bethel Roman here's this guy here, like just kind of methodical, making all the right decisions really is the biggest thing. He didn't make a ton of decisions where you're like, I probably would have done this or that. He made all the right decisions. He was the timing was great. Like, again, there was a ball he gave over the middle to Ashton Bethel Roman where it was just like, all right, that was right on time. That was great. There was a throw he made to Nate Borkercher over the window, over the middle, through a really tight window that was impressive. Just seemed to be a lot more confident. I think the question I have is you look at a lot of the throws that he made, a lot of screens, a lot of things over the middle, not a lot outside of the hashes, down the field. Like obviously he did perimeter screens, but like 10, 15, 20 yards down the field, not a lot outside the hash marks. And, the deep ball was that question. And the one deep ball opportunity he had to Casey Concepcion for a 48-yard touchdown. I mean, that's a throw you got to make. That's a layup. You underthrow that if you can. Now, I know that, like, you watch back that play, and I think there was a blitz coming, and it just set his feet and maybe got a little excited and didn't quite set himself before throwing it. But you got to make that throw because there was nobody within a 30-mile radius of KC Concepcion. But besides that, and besides maybe that one screen where, nearly was a pick, fantastic game, I felt like. Didn't have any turnover-worthy throws per PFF. And, again, just accurate, good decisions, all that sort of stuff. And, people say you can't take much from these kind of games, but we've seen in the past, like, I think back to Haynes King's game against Sam Houston State in 2021, where you're like, man, the decisions aren't there. Like he's putting the ball in harm's way pretty often. There's some games that can be a mirage, like New Mexico in 2023, where it's like, okay, yeah, the offense looks great, but it didn't really look like that ever again after that. So we'll have to see with a larger sample size, but from what we've been hearing all offseason about what this offense has looked like, from just the difference we've seen from Marcel Reed in practice and in that game, I just feel like this is going to be a lot more of what we see. I do find it interesting. They really didn't run him a lot. I know he had 8 carries, 39 yards, but it really felt like he did that in his sleep. Didn't do really any design stuff. And I would expect that to be the case this weekend too. But what's it going to look like against the better opponents, Notre Dame, Florida, Auburn? I kind of wonder if they let him loose a little more where, hey, maybe he has 13 carries for 70 yards. And that'll bring a totally additional dynamic to this offense that I think will help as well. So a lot of positives for sure. But I think a lot of people that one throw sticks in their minds. And so definitely would like to see him slinging it a little bit better outside the hashes deep.
Yeah, one thing that always stuck out to me, even going back to high school, when you go back and watch his high school film, you watch when he gets on the field, it just feels like he plays with a lot of confidence. And like not every throw is going to be perfect. There's going to be throws off the mark, but even you look into when he went into Florida, right? He plays Arkansas. Even leading A&M back against Auburn last year, it just feels like there's always kind of this confidence that no matter how things are going, he never seems to kind of come out lacking confidence. And I think that's a big thing that stands up. My final thought is, as I kind of look ahead to this week, you mentioned kind of Marcel Reed in the running game. I'd love to see the running game get going just overall. I think that was one of the big things. They didn't really need it against UTSA because they were kind of throwing it around. They got some big special teams plays, got a lot of guys involved in the running game. I want to see that running game be a lot more consistent this weekend. Maybe we kind of see, I kind of get the idea behind, easing Le'Veon Moss back into it, Ruben Owens. I kind of want to just see more from that overall unit. It doesn't really matter to me whether it's Le'Veon Moss or Ruben Owens or Amari Daniels or EJ Smith for that matter. I just kind of want to see that running game get going because I thought they had, obviously Ruben Owens had one nice run, but just the overall consistency of that unit, because I think that's really when they when they look ahead to Notre Dame week after, they're going to need to run the ball a lot better. So that'll be one of the big things I'm looking forward to about this weekend, and we'll be looking for going forward. To those tuning in, thank you very much for tuning into the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. We got a lot more coming on the site. We got a 60% promo for you to take advantage of right now that will cover you throughout the entire season. Plenty more to get to as we got you covered with recruiting, with team previews, and a bunch of content. So head on over there, and we'll see you guys over there. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.